A BBC documentary on Islamophobia has been causing quite a stir throughout the mainstream media after this inevitably agenda-driven broadcast was rudely interrupted by a chap called Paul for being, ironically, Islamophobic. Yes, this disgraceful racist dared to inject a bit of a reality check into another nauseating BBC interview with a self-proclaimed moderate Muslim called Shari'ah Harris, who sanctimoniously regales a pandering BBC journalist with endless tales of her victimhood as a consequence of the world finally waking up to her backward and barbaric ideology.
And it's come to the point now where I don't really think that me condemning these kind of attacks are going to change people's opinion.
What on earth could Paul have possibly said to cause such a commotion? Did he aggressively rip off her headscarf, proudly proclaiming his allegiance to Britain first? Did he tear out the pages of the Quran, put them in a sausage sandwich, and then set them alight with half a litre of Glen's vodka? Did he whip out a tattoo gun hidden in his lunchbox and start inscribing Jesus' Last Supper on her forehead? Well, not exactly. Disappointingly, the only words that this right-wing, violent, bigoted fascist roared was, "That's right, ladies and gentlemen. In terms of anticlimaxes, that one has to be up there with the best of them." Despite this simple and factual observation by our Paul, it was still enough to turn peaceful Muslim Rakia's hijab a bright shade of red, as she leaps out of her seat with vigour, seething with moderate rage, and immediately accosts him for his offensive and Islamophobic comments.
If you've got something to say, then you can say it. Do you want to talk about Sharia law? You want to talk about Sharia law to me? We'll talk about Sharia law. You obviously said it for a reason.
I wasn't talking to you.
Yeah, who were you talking to? Who are you talking to about Sharia law here, sir?
We're losing our right to freedom of expression. And I think...
Why is that?
Because we are. We're being told to be politically correct when we don't want to be politically correct.
Now, is it just me, or has the mainstream media conveniently chosen to ignore the true irony of this confrontational exchange? Because surely what Rakia has actually achieved is further proof, without doubt, that any criticism of Islam is simply not allowed. Who do you think has the real phobia in this situation? Paul, who calmly states the obvious, or Rakia, who furiously refuses to accept that an English infidel doesn't want her smelly religion taking over the country? I think I know the answer. How on earth can it now be deemed Islamophobic for not wanting to have Sharia law dragging our tolerant, welcoming and inclusive society back several thousand years into the gutters of the Dark Ages, where women are stoned to death for adultery and men are thrown off tall buildings for being nothing more than homosexual? If it is so irrational to fear Islam, why don't you moronic apologist lefties pack your bags and book a one-way ticket to the heart of the Middle East, where you can live happily ever after? But if this wasn't enough to make my piss literally itch, we then have a think tank called Demos chiming into the debate, standing proudly on their self-elected pedestals to reveal just how many anti-Islamic tweets were sent in the direct aftermath of the Nice terrorist attacks.
So each of these red dots is an anti-Islamic tweet coming from the UK. And that we can see happening right now, that's a digital reaction to the Nice attacks.
A massive red mass.
That's right, angry, abusive, anti-Islamic, all happening in the immediate aftermath of Nice.
Now, forgive me for being slightly confused, but I find it especially bizarre that someone who claims to be from a professional think tank fails to understand one of the very basic tenets of actually thinking: common sense. What exactly did you expect, Einstein? If a Muslim brutally murders another non-Muslim in cold blood shouting, "Allahu Akbar!" and scripture can be found within the Quran actively encouraging this behaviour, then surely we have the right to have an issue with the same God that has directly inspired its followers to commit these heinous crimes in the first place. Why is it that you find it so incomprehensible that there is a link between the fact that every single terrorist attack today is carried out by a Muslim and that they all happen to have the same copy of the world's worst fictional book of all time, the Quran? Is it because this suggestion would be racist? and Islamophobic. I genuinely cannot wait for the day that there are no anti-Islamic tweets on Twitter, and that I don't have to make these types of videos, because I honestly have much better things to do with my time. But for as long as there are Muslims out there blowing people up, raping, pillaging, and terrorizing the planet, then people like me will always exist. You see, I'm a symptom of the problem. And if you're so fed up with me and my Islamophobic opinions, then why don't you have a quiet word with the Muslims instead? If you can kindly request that they put their rusty beheading knives down and defuse their suicide vests and generally stop acting like feral monsters, I'll make sure that I never have to make another video in response. Sadly, until then, the only possible solution that I can come up with is to ask you all to kindly fuck off.